I think when he first went away, I naively thought that that would be the hardest part about the whole process, like him actually going to prison and being away from us and our lives. But to be honest, I've found that him returning to us was actually so much harder because he came back as a different person.
Welcome to Separate Bathrooms. My name's Brahe-Daddo, and this is usually where my wife, Elle, chimes in and says, "Hi, I'm Daddo." Not today. After, my gosh, 2 years, quarantines, masks, vaccinations, the Rona has caught up with Elle. She's resting a very weary body and a sore throat today. So whilst it is Separate Bathrooms, it's a very separate bathroom with just me and a couple with a story that I think you're going to find quite interesting. Theirs is a tale of grief, patience, dare I say forgiveness, insight, and yes, a healthy dose of humour. Mel Jacob is an experienced journalist and scriptwriter. Her journalism has been published in The Good Weekend, Sunday Life, Brisbane Times, Adelaide Advertiser, Kids Spot, you get the idea. And she's married to the father of her children, Patrick. Now here's a question for you. What would you do if your life took an unexpected detour when your seemingly saintly husband is jailed for 2 years? Let's find out how Mel and Patrick dealt with it. Welcome to the bathroom, Mel and Patrick. I've got to say, firstly, Elle sends her love to you both and apologises for her absence. It's her time to spend, hopefully only a few days, with that devilish beast we're calling COVID.
Sure, no problems. Thank you.
You guys have a story that, whilst you're clearly not the first to go through this, you've put it out into the world, but this is not a story that many of us are familiar with. You were married 14 years with kids, and then Patrick went to jail. Patrick, what happened?
So I had an archery business, and basically I got charged with selling 2 crossbows and a slingshot, which are illegal in New South Wales. And I also got charged with attempting to sell an unregistered firearm. So they were the charges. And I got sentenced to 2.5 years for that, and I ended up serving 2 years.
So is that one of those, just for me, is that one of those slingshots that you used to put on your wrist? Is that one of those ones?
They're the more advanced ones. I just had a basic one that you just hold. So the law is adults are not allowed to own, possess, sell slingshots, but kids are allowed to make them in the course of play. But you can't have a professionally made one, which is what I had.
Wow. 2.5 years.
Yeah.
Was that a surprise that it was for so long?
Absolutely, it was a surprise. The lawyers were telling me, man, if the judges had a really bad day, you might get a month in jail. And I was saying, I can't do a month in jail. I was just absolutely petrified, and I was thinking there's no way I could survive a month in jail. So hopefully but they're saying, look, it's probably not going to come to that. It's going to be weekend detention. It's going to be Section 10, which is no conviction, no victim, first offence, volunteer at all these charity organisations, Army Reserve, active in the church, all this sort of stuff. And my lawyer was saying, we've never heard of someone going to jail for this, first offence, especially all the crimes happen on one day. So it's not like there was a running total. And no previous criminal history. So the lawyers were saying there's almost no way. So yes, it came to absolute shock.
Were you in the city or the country?
In Penrith. Yeah. So
okay.
Sydney. Yeah.
How many kids did you have at the time?
So 2 at the time. So a little boy and a little girl.
How old were they?
Yeah, so when Patrick was first arrested, our daughter was 2 and our son was 5. And the court case went on for 2 years basically. So the day that Patrick went to jail, our daughter started kindergarten that day.
My goodness. Was there an issue about money at that point? Were you working, Melissa?
I was actually working as a freelance writer at the time, freelance journalist, and while Patrick had been sort of building up his business over the last few years. So basically when he ended up going to jail, which we weren't expecting, I really had to take the reins of his business and keep that going so that we had an income while he was away.
Right. No more selling slingshots for you.
That's right.
No.
But no, there was no money issues. There was no gambling. There was no drug or alcohol issues. There was no marriage problems. And basically, that's one of the reasons my lawyers tell me they threw the book at me. There was no mitigating circumstances. I couldn't go and say, oh, this is because of the drugs or the alcohol or the gambling. I had nothing, I just had no excuse pretty much.
Okay, so you've got a 2.5-year sentence. You've got 2 kids. Let's talk about the parenting issue then. How did you tell them, Melissa?
Yeah, well, look, that's something that we really grappled with from the beginning, and it's very common. Other parents that we met, like through the course of this process, chose not to tell their kids. We went a different route, and we decided that honesty is the best policy. And even though that was a lot harder in the beginning, telling them, that Dad did the wrong thing and he broke the law, I think now that so much time has passed, I actually think that was the best course of action for us. And it's helped them understand a lot more about people and the world, and has helped them become a lot more resilient as well.
Yeah, yeah.
But there was some certainly very tricky conversations to navigate, like especially early on, like our daughter was really confused about that some people that you should tell some people, or people that you're close to, and when it's appropriate to tell people or not tell people. And it was quite an embarrassing story that she actually, for news one day at school, shared that information with the class as part of a bigger story about like a show and tell. She brought sort of shampoo and conditioner bottles from a motel that I stayed at when we went to visit Patrick.
Right.
And so she was really confused about if there's nothing, if we should be ashamed of it, then why can't I tell people? And yeah, it was very tricky territory to navigate.
So she would have been about 3 or 4 at this stage?
Actually, so she started kindergarten when he went to jail.
Oh, okay.
So she was 5 at that time. So she was 5.
And your
So
son would have been 8?
when he was first arrested. Yes, yeah. He was around that time. And he was a very different personality at that time. He was really anxious. And so he was a real worrier. So he'd be worried about who Patrick was locked up with, if he was safe, if he was in with murderers. And I kept assuring him, of course, he wouldn't be, for that sort of crime. He wouldn't be locked up with a murderer, but that actually wasn't the truth, because when everyone's sentenced initially, they are held in remand.
Yeah.
So it's basically all together.
You're with
But I
everybody,
couldn't
aren't
tell
you?
him that. Yeah. So there was lots of things I had to keep from him because he kept worrying about things. But at the same time, we were trying to be open and honest.
How did you stay in your children's lives while you were in prison? I've spent a lot of time away from my kids on film sets and things, and drawn my handprint on pieces of paper and sent that to them so they can colour it in. I mean, a lot of that was before we had the internet and things like that. How did you stay in your kids' lives while you were in prison?
Well, we were allowed to have 6-minute phone calls. Very expensive. So I think it's like $2.80 for a 6-minute phone call. And you can have as many of those as you like, so long as typically there's only 2 phones from 80 inmates. So you have a phone call, talk to the kids, then you wait in line. You might be able to talk to them again 2 hours later for another 6 minutes. And you've also got to be wary that you can't spend more than $100 per week. So there's the money issue with making the phone calls from prison, and the time issue and queuing up for the phone. Then there's visits, but seeing I was 9 hours away when I was eventually in prison, as opposed to jail. So when I was in prison, I was 9 hours away. Visits can't be every weekend. Melissa really tried, and she did a lot of weekends, often every second weekend, or 2 or 3 times a month. And then there's letters as well, so I could actually send letters, but that only gets sent out twice a week or something. So there was phone calls, letters, and visits pretty much.
And that must have been very difficult for you.
Yeah, it is very difficult because the kids sort of have to perform on cue. Like, it can be dinner time with Melissa, and they could have just come home from school, and they often would not want to even talk to me because they're busy. Their friends just came over, but it's like my 6 minutes has just come up. I've been waiting for 2 hours for it, and they've pretty much got to come on, and Melissa's got to tell them to be happy to talk to me, and often they were, but a lot of the time, sometimes they had other commitments and had other things.
Absolutely. Hey, you just said something. You said jail and prison as 2 different things.
Yeah, so jail's pretty much when you're on remand. So jail's where you go when you're not sentenced, or when you've been sentenced and you haven't been sent to your classification prison. And then prison's where you serve your time once you've been sentenced. So jail's a mix of both, but prison's only for people that have been sentenced to know what their prison term's going to be.
We will talk about your book, Mel. There is a quote that I got. It was something that your daughter said, where she said to you, "So why did you marry my dad?" My daughter asked. And your response is, "Well, over time I got to know him and he made me laugh. And I knew deep down that even though we were really different, he was a good person." Without skipping a beat, she said, "He's not that good. He's in jail." I mean, you had to navigate a lot. You've got 2 little kids under 10, and you're a single parent, and your husband is in jail and prison, eventually prison. Thanks for that distinction. I never knew that. How was it for you socially, Mel?
Yeah, that's a really great question, Cam. Look, we had to navigate a lot of those tricky questions, and it was that really hard balance. Like, kids ask a lot of questions anyway, and our daughter's personality, she's always been really confident, kind of the sort of personality you have to rein in a little bit. And she had lots of questions about, what's a good person and what's a bad person, and that's, a really hard question to answer. And there was a correctional facility in the area that we would sometimes drive past, like a different correctional facility that we would drive past. And I think we'd seen people tending cows. This was years previous, and I'd apparently said something like, "Oh, the bad people are in there." And so the kids asked a lot about that, and then what that meant for their dad, and if he's bad, and if we're going to stay together, and things like that. And it was a really tricky thing to know what to share with people.
Yeah.
And I was actually probably quite worried about people judging me with that information. I mean, I think it's important to say that, given the nature of Patrick's crime, not minimising it at all, but if it was of a more serious nature, I think probably people's response to us would be very different. But I found that largely I was quite surprised that when I did share with people, even though it's not a common experience, I was surprised how often, though, people did share with me that someone in their circle had been affected, whether it's a brother or uncle or a father. It's sort of more common than you realise. I've had so many people contact me and reach out, because sadly it is a fact of people's lives, and I think it's important to have those conversations, because if we want people to if people do go to prison, and then when they come out and they want them to integrate into society, like they often come out with a lot more problems than they went in with in the first place. So I think those conversations really helped me. Like, people being vulnerable actually helped me, connecting with other people.
Yeah.
It was largely, a very supportive experience.
I mean, I have heard this, Patrick, that often, someone can go in, as Mel just sort of said, that you go into prison and you come out way better educated on how to be a criminal. Was that your experience?
Well, I had a little bit of a strange upbringing. I was very religious. So I don't drink, for example. I don't smoke. I've never had tattoos. I don't know anyone that are criminals. It was so far removed from my life experience that I was almost in complete shock for the whole time. And inmates were wary of me because they often accused me of being an undercover policeman trying to get information, because I'd ask things and, like, everyone knows that. I'd ask about their crime, and I'd ask about what's going to happen next to me, and I often got accused of being undercover. So inmates were very wary of. I never saw drugs. I mean, drugs were everywhere, but I never saw them, which is bizarre because they were in the rooms next to me. Yeah, so not really for me. People were always very wary to tell me anything. Anything. Things came up every now and then.
Yeah.
But I talked about one time with a friend that I bought a lawnmower, and everyone's laughing, going, "You don't buy lawnmowers. You knock it off. You go up your street, you knock it off from your neighbours." They're like, "Who's ever bought a lawnmower?"
I've bought 3.
And there's quite, in conversations, I'd say things like that, and they'd say, "What? You got your full license? You had a solicitor represent you at your case?" And so my experience was different to a lot of the others, and they were very wary to actually share much with me.
Yeah, Patrick actually kept a lot of stories from me. Usually he does, love a good story and likes to share stories with me, but I think he didn't want me to worry about things because, he was straight away went into remand and was in with all these, people so different from him, people that you'd be really scared walking down the street next to,
Yeah.
bikies and stuff like that. And then he eventually, did tell me share a lot of these stories with me, which is kind of what led me to, writing the book. Like it's partly my process of, forgiving him and dealing with all of that, but also a lot of these crazy stories that he told me, to do with Patrick, the story about the drugs and the guy going to the toilet, for example.
Yeah, so I was in Pod 17 at MRRC, which is Silverwater, the Metropolitan Remand Reception Centre. I was in a 4-out, which means I'm in with 3 other inmates in the one cell. Okay. A lot of cells are 1 out or 2 out, but I was in a 4-out. And I was in with one of the bikies, Hammer, and inmates are coming up to me and they're saying, hey, did Hammer go to the toilet? I'm like, I don't know. And they kept bugging me saying, did Hammer go to the toilet today? Can you tell me when Hammer goes to the toilet? I'm like, I'm not telling you when Hammer goes to the toilet. And then eventually I got the nerve to ask Hammer, I said, why is every inmate in the place asking me about when you're going to the toilet? And he says, because I had a visit from my solicitor yesterday. Oh, so as if that's supposed to explain it to me. That I still had no idea.
Is the solicitor bringing him soliciting things?
Yes.
Unsolicited things.
So everyone knows that when they get visits from their solicitors, that's when you watch out for when they're doing number 2s, apparently. And so I'm like, what is going on in this place? And for the whole 2 years, I just a lot of the time had no idea what was going on around me.
Probably a good thing, though.
Yes. And because I had to ask questions, people thought I was suspicious, because I had to ask what was going on. And they're like, oh, you want us to say it louder for the tape that you're holding, and stuff like
in
that.
Your bum.
Yes.
Look, no hands.
Yes, that's right.
Oh, my goodness.
Another funny story with one of the bikies I was in prison with, he got a letter and he says, hey, someone said you can read. I said, yeah, I can read pretty well. He says, can you read this letter I got from my girlfriend? Right? And I'm reading the letter. Anyway, we go into a cell, a 2-out cell, someone else's cell, and he locks the door behind him, which he can do. So there's 2 of us in the cell, and all the other inmates are like, what's going on with them 2, right? Thinking I might be in trouble. Anyway, I'm reading this letter, and his girlfriend's saying, I'm breaking up with you, you're an idiot, I'm selling your bike. And he's getting really aggro and he's punching the walls, he's kicking, and he's just making a huge ruckus in
with
the
you
cell.
Beside him in there.
And I'm thinking, I can't read this next line.
Oh my God.
The next line saying, I've sold your bike, I sold it for $100, I'll give you 50. And I'm thinking,
don't shoot them. Yeah,
don't shoot the messenger.
And I'm thinking, I cannot read the next line. Anyway, I got through the whole letter. We open the cell, and he comes out really disheveled and crying and tears and, upset and angry. And I sort of come in with the sort of shock look that I had for the whole 2 years that no one could kind of decipher. And inmates have come up to me going, what on earth did you do to him? And they're talking to each other saying, don't be let alone with that guy, as in me, because the bikie came out, in such a shocking condition. I just came out the same way I went in.
So you were like
I got a
wizard.
reputation. I got a reputation for being an unknown quantity that you don't want to mess with. There was a few examples of that where people were like, what is this guy? You don't want to mess with him. Even though I've never been in a fight in my life. I've hardly been to a pub in my life.
Wow. What would your advice be to someone who is about to go into prison?
My advice would be to be friendly and not ask too many questions and to try and keep to yourself. Everyone said to me, keep to yourself. The problem with that I found is you have to live with yourself, and sometimes you've got to stand up and have your voice be heard because something's going down that's wrong, and you might be the only voice of reason.
Right.
And that happened 3 or 4 times when I was in serious danger, where I would have been in no danger if I just keep my mouth shut and let what happened happen. But instead I would stand up and say, no, that guy didn't do anything. I was with him the whole time. And often, quite a few times, I got in trouble for that.
In trouble with who? With
inmates.
Oh, with inmates. And was that scary?
Yeah. So there's one particular case where there was one Jewish inmate and some guys came up to me and they said, we're going to bash Raf, right? And they said, we just need all the inmates to say they're okay with that. And I said, well, Raf's never done anything against me. I said, I hardly spoke to the guy. And they said, that's fine. Just have to say that you're okay. Just sign off and say there's no issue. I said, I can't say there's no issue. I have got an issue. I don't know the guy. I'm not giving you approval to bash this guy.
Right.
And then my friends said, Patrick, you don't know what you're doing. They said, please just say you're okay. You don't know this guy. You don't owe him anything. And I said, but he's not done anything against me. Why am I going to say it's okay? So everyone's saying, you're going to get in serious trouble where you weren't involved in this situation whatsoever.
Mm.
And eventually other inmates came up to me and said, you know what? Raf's never done anything against me. I'm like, okay.
Bless you.
And eventually there was like 12 of us out of 80 that decided Raf's not done anything against us and we're not going to sign off on it. And he didn't get bashed. And the point is the other inmates, they thought there was this posse of 12 that might do something if Raf was hurt.
Mm.
And there was a few examples like that where if I just kept my head down like everyone told me, then I would have had to still live with myself when I got out. And so that advice is one that I say you have to take with caution, because you can't always keep to yourself and look away, because you will feel guilty and you won't be able to live with yourself afterwards.
Wow. Well, okay, so you did it. How was the time for both of you, the transition back into, I guess, civilian life? And you wouldn't have had, I imagine in prison there was a pretty tight schedule, lights on, doors closed, all that sort of business. So Mel, how was that with Patrick coming back into the house with the kids? Pat, how were you with that transition? And did it take a long time?
It did take a really long time. And I think when he first went away, I naively thought that would be the hardest part about the whole process, like him actually going to prison and being away from us and our lives. But to be honest, I found that him returning to us was actually so much harder, because he came back as a different person. He was suffering from post-traumatic stress and he was very angry. And we'd just been living these really separate lives, and it was really difficult for us to connect. Like I was really, really busy with the kids and trying to run his business and do everything, whereas he was in jail, and even though he had like a job, various jobs working there, he had all the time in the world to be thinking of things. And so he came back thinking, what have you been doing? The house is a mess.
Oh my God. I do that when I come back from a shoot.
And I was like, what have I been doing? Are you crazy?
Oh, wow.
And I think also he'd been trying to protect me by not, he's surrounded by such violent people for a lot, large part of that time. He was really on edge and really anxious. Like I remember one of the first home visits that he had, I sort of touched him on the arm and he flinched. Yeah. And so it was really, really hard to kind of reconnect and for him to just, be able to relax. I think just from being around such violence, and he eventually did share some stories about, there was a story, Patrick would do a better job of sharing it, but
so you have something called the buy-up, which is when you get to spend money on junk food once a week. And I had a spare Coke, and this guy said, can I have that can of Coke? And I gave it to him, didn't know anything about him. And he stabbed someone because he was just about to finish his sentence and get deported back to Brazil. And he was like, jail in Australia is better than life on the street in Brazil.
Incredible.
And he said to me, you know what? I had you pegged for the guy I was going to stab. But since you gave me that Coke, he said I had to find someone else. And I was like, oh.
What was that revelation like? How did that feel?
I just went white as a ghost and just, absolutely in shock. But I was the obvious target. I didn't have any associations with any groups of people trying to protect me.
Right.
I didn't have any friends or anything that would stand up. So I was the obvious choice. But it was that can of Coke that saved me. And that wasn't the first or last time that kind of thing happened, where I was just kind or nice to someone. And they told me that, they earmarked me to do something too.
Mel, when Patrick went to prison, did you sort of have to make a conscious choice to put your relationship on hold or to make any extra effort?
Yeah, look, I think we certainly did have to make an effort, but for me, probably the number one priority was the kids, and making sure they're okay and, their mental health's okay and they were happy. So I was kind of probably a little bit harsh to Patrick because I was focusing just really on the kids and thinking, sure, you need money for a quilt, but I'm sorting the kids out first. And I did join a couple of, Facebook groups or chat rooms and things like that with other people whose partners are in prison. But a lot of them I found they were like, and what makes me look terrible, but like pining for their partner and just going, I can't wait to see you. And often they didn't have kids. And I was just I hadn't reached that point of forgiveness yet.
Did you guys get professional help? Did you get therapy to sort of help you like come back together again as a couple?
Well, we actually got professional help, but kind of separately. That actually worked best for us because we had very different issues, and that helped us connect. But it really, for me, got to the point like if Patrick couldn't change that behaviour, then it wasn't really going to last for us. It just wasn't working. Like he was so angry, and so he couldn't see it. Like as all of us, I suppose, can't see something when we're doing it, but that how much it was affecting us and our relationship and everything else that he really needed to let that stuff go. And I did too. Like I was still really angry with him for breaking the law and, for all the different sacrifices we both had to make. So I had to kind of make a decision as well. So yeah, absolutely seeing a psychologist really helped us get through that process.
Yeah. Yeah. Was it a shock that suddenly you, on your first night or first week back, that holy, I can actually do whatever I want, and there are my children, there's my wife. I can get a Mars bar if I want to, or
I said when I was in jail for 2 years, almost every night I said to myself, I'm never ever going to complain if my wife says to me at midnight or 2 a.m, we need milk. Wake up, go and drive to the service station and get milk for the morning. I thought I will never ever complain about that, and I think to this day it's fairly true to say that I haven't, and I do that with no notice. I'll go and buy bread or milk, go and drive there. And I'll always remember me thinking about that when I go and drive and get milk at 8 o'clock at night or 10 o'clock at night or whatever the case may be. When I came out the first few days, like Melissa said, I was very angry. So I had PTSD. In prison, when you're bored and you've got nothing to do, believe it or not, a lot of people clean their cells so thoroughly, and that's all they've got to do. It's like a paranoia. So they might sweep their floor 10 times a day in their little cell. And then when I came home, I noticed the fridge hadn't been cleaned for a few days, and I couldn't believe it. Like, what? You're free to do this. You don't have to wait to be let out of your cell to go to the common fridge. You can do it any time you like. How on earth can it be dirty in the fridge? And I blew up at Melissa for having the fridge being a little bit dirty or a little bit in disarray. Not much. In fact, probably average, probably standard, but just not what I was used to. And I was very difficult to live with for a number of years, actually.
Yeah, we certainly do take our freedoms for granted, I think. Guys, if I know someone has a partner in prison or they're about to go to prison, is there a way or are there things to avoid, or how should I bring it up?
Well, yeah, I think you can ask them, do you feel comfortable telling me, what he did? And more often than not, they will. And often they do like to share, like Melissa has found. Melissa, what do you think?
Yeah, I think it also really depends probably on the nature of the crime. Like I have done a couple of talks and things like that with people, with groups of partners and their husbands are in prison, but for a couple of the groups it's been for a crime that's of a much more serious nature, like a murder or things to do with sex crimes, and obviously the reception that they get from other people. People are in shock. They don't know how to handle it. Even with us, they're often quite shocked about the experience, and once they got to know the nature of the charges, and not that we're celebrating that or diminishing them, but it's probably really different. But look, I think it's while crime is not to be celebrated, I think, look, we're all human. We make mistakes. I think I used to have a very black and white view of the world. The older I get, the more I realise it's very grey. Things are complicated. So I think, it's a great point that Patrick said earlier about just asking if they're comfortable to share with it. And because we're very lucky in that we've, still had employment and still had a business. But for a lot of people who get out of jail, just even getting a job or getting back on their feet takes years, or they still really struggle to find a job just because of their history.
Is there any one thing for both of you as a pearl of wisdom that you took out of this time?
For me, it's like you talked about freedom. There is no feeling like it. You have to experience no freedom to experience it. So if I was to say, what would you prefer? Would you prefer to never have a thirst in your whole life, so never know what it's like to be thirsty? Or would you prefer to experience what it's like to be thirsty and then come to crystal clear, icy water and have a drink? So for me, the experiencing not having freedom has in a lot of ways changed how I see things and do things. And a real experience for me that I kind of don't regret, but I know what the difference is.
How about you, Mel?
I think my big takeaway from the experience is probably to do with forgiveness, my great stumbling block. And I was really angry also with Patrick that he'd done that. It was kind of a betrayal, but in a different way. And I was really angry and you mentioned earlier, Cam, about things being a choice. And I think for me, it came to a choice. I had to make a decision about, forgiving him. And I think in life, life's long and it can be hard sometimes. I think it does really make your life better and richer if you can do that.
Yeah. Before you go, I'd be remiss if I didn't put you into the 2-minute shower. Well, it's almost like back in prison time, I'm sure, Patrick, where you get to have a timed shower. We do a thing called the 2-minute shower. It's where we save the water. I ask you questions and just brief answers, please. First question. This is to both of you. What's your best quality?
My best quality is that I'm very chill, which is kind of the opposite to what I was when I got out. I would say that, I take things in my stride now and don't sweat the small stuff.
Mel?
I think my best quality is that, my creativity.
Creativity. All right. What's your partner's best quality?
I think he's really funny. He's a very funny person.
I would say Melissa's is her sensitivity. So she's sensitive to everyone and understands some intricacies that I just don't see and don't understand. She's all things to all men in a lot of regards.
All right. Is there one moment in your life you would like to revisit?
I would say probably having our first child was an awesome day. I'd like to revisit.
I can go for the second child. Absolutely. Having a child is just really magical, beautiful thing.
Hey, here's another question. Kiss or hug?
Kiss.
Kiss, yep.
Craziest thing you've done for love?
Probably stayed with Patrick after he went to jail.
In the jail?
No, stay with me after jail. Is what she's saying.
Okay.
Craziest thing I've done for love? I would say pay a multi-murderer to make Melissa a vase out of crochet paper that she still has to this day.
Actually, I've got it here.
Let's see it.
Yeah.
Well, it's very multicoloured.
That's made of paper. Can you believe that?
Yeah, so it was made, a guy in jail made that, and he was charged with murder actually. He made that out of, he got into origami apparently when he was in jail, so.
Beautiful. What the world needs now is?
Yeah, I think more understanding, like the ability to listen to each other.
I'd say patience for each other.
Your partner in one word?
Thoughtful.
Organised.
Thoughtful and organised. You guys, what an education you've given me, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners today about life in prison and what it's like to be separated because of that and having your freedoms taken away. And you've been so generous with your time and info, and I wish you nothing but love and continued, togetherness and success in your relationship with the kids. It's just brilliant. Thank you so much. The book is called In Sickness, in Health and in Jail. You guys have been so generous today, so thank you so much.
Thanks very much. Thanks for having us.
Our pleasure. Thank you, Cam. And we miss you, Ali.
See you, Ali. See you, Cam. Thank you.
Well, normally I'd be looking across at Alison going, oh my God, Was that the most fantastic conversation? She's not here. But that was fabulous. I sure do hope that you got something from that. I certainly did. One is to be grateful for our freedoms, to be grateful for things in life and how things can change just by a couple of dumb choices. Incredible. Life is amazing. Can I also do this? This is an ad for Ali's book, Queen Menopause. It's out in May, but you can pre-order it. And she probably wouldn't say anything about it. We might have a better discussion together and talk about the book because I'm so proud of her. So proud of her. Get a little teary even thinking about it. She worked on it for 3 years and she wrote that thing all by herself. And I say all by herself because often people have ghostwriters. Alison did not. It's all her, with some special guests in there talking about their story going through menopause. So very proud of her. All right, we'll be back together next time because I'm sure COVID will have passed, hopefully, and left the house. I won't be affected by it. Please, if you're enjoying Separate Bathrooms, rate us on your podcast app. Until next time, as I do every night on Smooth FM, I say dream big. Bye for now.